Hello DGE students, carers and parents. It's Miss Begley here with your English lesson for the week. I'm going to read to you an extract from a novel called Dracula. It's written by Bram Stoker in 1897. In this extract you will hear a journey of a young man, a solicitor, making his way in a horse-drawn carriage in the middle of the night up to Castle Dracula. While you're listening to the story, I'd like you to think about how the author used language to create a vivid setting. What kind of words has the author used to create this setting? Also, while I'm reading, I'm going to give you 3 questions to think about. Number 1, I'd like to list 3 things you learn about the weather. Number 2, what makes the driver stop the coach? And number 3, what makes the wolves disappear? Please feel free to go and get some pen and some paper to write down your answers, and I will stop to give you time to write down some notes. Right, I'm going to start with the reading. Soon we were hemmed in with trees, which in places arched right over the roadway, till we passed as through a tunnel, and again great frowning rocks guarded us boldly on either side. Though we were in shelter, we could hear the rising wind, for it moaned and whistled through the rocks, and the branches of the trees crashed together as we swept along. It grew colder and colder still, and fine powdery snow began to fall, so that soon we and all around us were covered in a white blanket. The keen wind still carried the howling of the dogs, though this grew fainter as we went on our way. The baying of the wolves sounded nearer and nearer, as though they were closing round on us from every side. I grew dreadfully afraid, and the horses shared my fear. But the driver was not in the least disturbed. He kept turning his head from left to right. But I could not see anything through the darkness. Okay, take a minute or two just to write down. What 3 things have you learnt about the weather? Okay, in the opening of this extract, what have you learnt about the weather? 3 things. All right, question 2 is what makes the driver stop the coach? You'll hear this in the next few sentences. Suddenly, away on our left, I saw a faint, flickering blue flame. The driver saw it at the same moment. He at once checked the horses and, jumping to the ground, disappeared into the darkness. I did not know what to do. The less of the howling of the wolves grew closer, but while I wondered, the driver suddenly appeared again, and without a word took his seat, and we resumed our journey. I think I must have fallen asleep and kept dreaming of the incident, for it seemed to be repeated endlessly, and now, looking back, it's like a sort of awful nightmare. Okay, what makes the driver stop the coach? Write down your thoughts. Okay, I'm going to read a few more sentences before I stop, because the next question is about the wolves. But before I get there, I'm just going to read a little bit more. Once the flame appeared so near the road that even in the darkness around us I could watch the driver's motions. He went rapidly to where the blue flame arose. It must have been very faint, for it did not seem to illuminate the place around at all, and gathering a few stones, formed them into some device. Once there appeared a strange optical effect. When he stood between me and the flame, he did not obstruct it, for I could see its ghostly flicker all the same. This startled me. As the effect was only momentary, I took it that my eyes deceived me, straining through the darkness. Then, for a time, there were no blue flames, and we sped onwards through the gloom, with the howling of the wolves around us, as though they were following in a moving circle. Okay, now I'm going to read the next bit about the wolves. So, what makes the wolves disappear? Okay, you might have picked up on a few clues already as I was reading those last few sentences about the driver. Okay, I want you to think next, what makes the wolves disappear and why? Maybe think about why. Okay. At last there came a time when the driver went further afield than he had done yet, and during his absence the horses began to tremble worse than ever, and to snort and scream with fright. I could not see any cause for it, for the howling of the wolves had ceased altogether. But then the moon, sailing through the black clouds, appeared behind a jagged crest of a beetling pine-clad rock, and by its light I saw around us a ring of wolves, with white teeth and lolling red tongues, with long sinewy limbs and shaggy hair. They were 100 times more terrible in the grim silence which held them than even when they howled. For myself, I felt a sort of paralysis of fear. It is only when a man himself is face to face with such horrors that he can understand their true import. All at once the wolves began to howl as though the moonlight had some peculiar effect on them. The horses jumped about and reared and looked helplessly around with eyes that rolled in a way painful to see. But the living ring of terror encompassed on them every side, and they had to perforce to remain within it. I called to the coachman to come, for it seemed to me that our only chance was to try and break out through the ring and to aid his approach. I shouted and I beat on the side of the carriage, hoping by the noise to scare the wolves from that side, so as to give him a chance of reaching the trap. How he came there I know not, but I heard his voice raised in a tone of imperious command, and looking towards the sound, saw him stand in the roadway. As he swept his long arms, as though brushing aside some impalpable obstacle, the wolves fell back, and back further still. Just then, a heavy cloud passed across the face of the moon, so that we were again in darkness. When I could see the driver was climbing into the carriage and the wolves had disappeared. This was all so strange and uncanny that a dreadful fear came upon me, and I was afraid to speak or move. The time seemed impermeable as we swept on our way, now in almost complete darkness, for the rolling clouds obscured the moon. We kept on ascending with occasional periods of quick descent, but in the main always ascending. Suddenly, I became conscious of the fact that the driver was in the act of pulling up the horses in the courtyard of a vast ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line against the moonlit sky. Okay, I would like you to think, what made the wolves disappear? Okay, and if you have an answer, if you know why they if you know how they disappeared, think about why. Okay, what made them disappear? Why? Right. I'm going to set you 2 challenges. Okay, the first challenge is, having listened to all of that journey, you can choose, by the way, challenge 1 or challenge 2. So challenge 1 is to draw a map of the narrator's journey to Castle Dracula, using labels and arrows to highlight specific details. So think about where the journey starts. What does he travel through? Describe the weather, so maybe put a label to talk about what kind of weather he encounters on his journey. Think about some of the things that you've heard being described, maybe the trees, a tunnel. Think about some of those things. Put them down with arrows and labels. Also think about where the coach stops. Okay, make a little diagram to show that the coach has stopped. Okay, what do they see? What happens? Add some colour in. And then think about their journey up to the castle. I've used the word ascending, so think, does ascending mean going up or down? Occasionally, the narrator says it descends, but on the main it ascends. Okay, so is that going up or down? I'm giving you lots of clues here. Challenge B is to write what happens next. So the narrator is going to go into the castle. All right, I'd like you to think about the 5 senses, give a little bit of a description about what he might see, hear, feel, taste, or hear, feel, taste, see, and what's the 5th one? Hear, feel, taste, see, and smell. Okay, so 5 senses. Think about describing that castle entrance as he goes in, and then give a little account of what's going to happen to him. Is this going to be a strange and spooky experience for him? Give some details. I would be really interested to read your stories. So if you get them written down and you send them back to your tutor, I would like to create a display, maybe even a competition. Likewise, if you decide to draw a map, add in lots of colour, lots of detail, get your parents to take a picture of it and email it back to your tutors. And we will create a display, and I think we can have a competition running at the same time. Okay, all right, well, thank you for your time, guys. Have a lovely week and speak to you soon. Bye.